Welcome to New Rechts, or for our English listeners, New Right. My name is Daniel de Liever, and today we're going to talk about the political situation in France. And surprisingly, this is a topic that's not talked about a lot in the Netherlands, even though it's one of our most important neighbors together with Germany. So I am happy to talk about this topic today. And today, to talk about this topic, I'm here with Jean-Charles Solier. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
I think we have a lot to discuss because I would say French politics is definitely complicated and there are a lot of things going on. But before we do, maybe you can give a short introduction to our listeners and also later to our readers of who you are before we get into the political situation.
Yes. So my name is Jean-Charles Soulier. I work as a freelance journalist right now. So I write articles for several media in France. I graduated in my master a few years ago in journalism and German cultural studies. At the Sorbonne. La Sorbonne, it's the main university in Paris for those of you who don't know it. Yes, so I was also invited to ARC with the French delegation, and that's where we met each other. So.
Yes, and for those that don't know ARC, I already talked about it a little bit before, but it's like a conservative conference. It means Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, where you could say people from the right to conservative movements all across the West, I would say, come together, and even a little bit outside of that. It's great that we now can dive a little bit deeper into the French situation. There's a lot to talk about, but let's talk with your overall feeling. How would you assess the current political situation in France?
It's quite complicated, actually. Maybe you know a little about it, but a few months before, we had President Emmanuel Macron, a French president, decided to throw a new parliamentary election. So there was a lot going on. Even his political allies from his own party thought that it was an insane thing to do. So even people near him were shocked that he did this, because he was putting his position at risk by doing that. And at the beginning, a lot of people thought that the main right-wing party in France, the National Rally, led by Marine Le Pen, would win the majority of seats, and that the second leader of National Rally, Jordan Bardella, would be the prime minister of Emmanuel Macron. So doing what we call in France a coalition. So a coalition is when a president and the prime minister are from two different parties, but it didn't win this way. It didn't go this way because from the far left to the what we call the Republican Party. So it's the traditional right wing, if you can say, party.
More of a center party, right? You could say that is
right center or something like that. Center right. And they decided all together by tractations and political alliances to prevent National Rally to become the main party in the parliament. And there was a big alliance called Le Nouveau Front Populaire, who had communists, social democrats, socialists, and also members from LFI, La France Insoumise, which you could call a far left party in France. And by doing that, they prevented the National Rally to become the main to have their prime minister from their party. But National Rally is still the political party right now with the main seats in the parliament, in the French parliament. So even if it was not the winning that they expected, it was a winning for them anyway.
That's a fair point. I do think there are a few things in what you said that are interesting to talk about. I think we have talked about, at our platform, we've talked about all these different events happening, but now if you put them in perspective, you have this right-wing party of Marine Le Pen, who's definitely very popular. You could say the most popular party in France, but basically almost everyone is working together to make sure that they don't get in power. It's quite interesting. Do you feel like that Marine Le Pen and her party, that they can keep this momentum into for example, the next presidential elections, and moving forward? Do you think that they inevitably will become the biggest dominant party in France, or do you think that now there is a potential possibility that other parties will again work together to make sure that Marine Le Pen does not get into power?
It's always difficult to make assumptions about the future or to predict what's going to happen in the future. What I can say is that the National Rally won't disappear. Even if sometimes I consider that they make political mistakes sometimes or stuff like that, they are still the main party in France, and I think their progression is still going on as long as Macron is in power. So no, I think they will continue to grow. Will Marine Le Pen become the next French president? It's complicated because they are always talked about the past of the party, that some members were implicated with at some bad connections during the Second World War and stuff like that. But there are a lot of new faces in this party, and the president of this party, because to be clear, Marine Le Pen is no more president of the party. She's president of the Parliament Alliance in the party of this party, of the National Rally, but Jordan Bardella is the president of the party.
That's a good point, yes.
European Parliament and not the French Parliament.
And what makes this party so popular? Well, what are the issues of French people, I guess, in general, that make them vote for this right-wing party?
I think the fact that this party attracts people is because they focus their strategy on two main political topics. First, of course, immigration. Like every right-wing party around the world, they focus a lot on immigration, and it's quite an important subject because even in at the left or at the center, they talk a lot about it because we have a severe immigration problem in France. But they also focus on the social and economic issues of French people because we had a long going inflation since I think the end of COVID practically, and with the the Ukrainian Russian war too. So yes, I think it's the two main topics that they focus about and that are really important to the French people, and also the fact that because before 2017, so it was the year Emmanuel Macron was elected for the first time. There were two main parties in French: Republican Party and Socialist Party. Parti socialiste et parti et les LR. We call that like that in French, and it was either a member of the Socialist Party or a member from the Republican Party who were becoming president. For example, before Emmanuel Macron, it was François Hollande from the Socialist Party, and before François Hollande, it was Nicolas Sarkozy from the Republican Party. And then Macron came in and said, we must get rid of these old parties and create a new way of doing in politics. And it worked effectively for him, at least to get elected. But I think it also benefited to the National Rally because people had really enough of these two traditional parties who didn't make France better and made it worse, made the political situation worse.
This is quite interesting. Why would let's say the politics of Macron? Why would this also benefit the politics of parties that are more right wing than Macron's own party?
Because when Macron said that, okay, I'm going to take people from the socialist, people from the Republican, and make it into a big central party, it made French people understand that you can have a way in politics, and you can have a party outside of these two big ones.
Okay, that's a fair point. I'm also curious what you think. Like you already said, all these parties, you could almost say, colluded together to make sure that they stayed in power, in a sense, right? That that there was no right wing party that became even bigger than they did. How do you feel like people in society, the French people, responded to the last parliamentary election in which this unusual thing happened?
So there's actually the strategy that the left-wing party and the center party used during this new parliamentary election. It's called in French le barrage. It's like I don't know the traduction in English, but it's like
it's the barrier, right? I would say
yeah, barrier strategy. And it's always the same strategy. So for example, the National Rally starts growing in the polls, polls at TV and radio. They say, oh my God, they're gonna get all the seats, they are gonna have a tremendous win. And then so the other parties reunite and tell, okay, no, it's not possible. It can't happen because a National Rally is a fascist party. They are Nazi. It's the 1930s again. They are
all the classics that they always say to any right-wing party, basically in Europe.
Yeah. And they say to the French people, if you want to prevent fascism from winning, then vote for us. Even if the policies are not better than National Rally, but you have to vote for us anyway because we are the protectors of democracy.
Ah, yes. This is the classic. But then let's, for 1 second, play devil's advocate, right? Do you think there's any merit to the criticism on the National Rally that they are an extreme right-wing party? Do you think it's just them, other parties trying to put them down? Or do you actually think that there is some danger there?
No, saying that they're a fascist party is nonsense. It's nonsense. Even far right parties, because if you look at the theory, for example, Umberto Eco, was a famous author. He wrote some rules on how to recognize far right and extremist fascist parties. And one of their characteristics is that they don't comply with the parliamentary system. They want to get rid of it. And people and even left-wing party have to recognize that the National Rally is integrating perfectly in the parliamentary system. There is nothing wrong with him. So no, calling them fascist party, it's nonsense. Saying that
all right.
they have bad policies and that their policies is not, they won't be capable of doing it. You can't say that. You can use constructive criticism. It's what democracy is all about, debating and find whether this policy is applicable or not. But it's never about it. They never appeal to French people intelligence, It's always the strategy of fear.
That's I think it's a fair point, and I would even make the argument that when you don't have any intellectual points left to make, that their policy is worse, etc., then all that you have left to do is just to point a childish picture of a party. But you will see that the same. We have it with the Freedom Party in the Netherlands of Geert Wilders is in this sense quite similar, which are now in power, and you could say too little happened instead of too much. But definitely democracy did not die. You could say they're just playing their part now. But to go back to France, I think what's interesting now, we see that especially Macron, especially of course that we now have, let's just say, turbulent geopolitical times. Macron is trying to make himself look like a leader. I see people online making the joke that he wants to present himself as the new Napoleon.
Yeah.
What do you think is kind of the legacy so far of Macron? And well, because from I think people in, for example, the Netherlands, don't really have a lot of information about his role in French politics.
Well, yeah. I mean, what I can say is that he has a very low popularity in France.
Mhm.
Is I think hated by most French people uh,
Mhm.
because of his Authoritarianism. Yeah,
Hmm.
and yeah,
What do you mean by that? Just so I understand.
well, for example, we had a huge fight. I thought in 2022 there was a lot of protests because of the pension reform.
Mhm.
Because the Macron wanted to raise the age of pension.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of fight going on because French people were the majority of French people were against it, but his political party used a
Mhm.
trick in the constitution. It's not a trick, but an article called
Mhm.
Article 49.3, 49.3. And it's an article of the French Constitution that allows the government to impose a reform without the approval of the parliamentaries.
Mhm.
Yeah, and even during the COVID era, he they also did a lot of unpopular decisions, like
Mhm.
sanitary pass. People couldn't get out of their house, and there were also vaccine mandate. And one sentence, especially I think that shocked a lot French people, is when he said that he wanted to il voulait emmerder les non vaccinés in France. So it's I don't think I can translate it in English because it's quite rude, but yeah, let's say that he wanted to mess with the unvaccinated people. So he
Mhm.
wanted
Mhm.
to fuck
Mhm.
up their lives.
Mhm. Mhm. I see. So I guess there are quite some reasons why people are unhappy with Macron. I think there's some other players, of course. We talked about National Rally, but of course there are also other right-wing parties in France. I'm curious what you think of that. Of course, one that maybe some people in the Netherlands will know, of course, is Eric Zemmour. Um, I'm quite curious. I'm quite curious what you actually think of him and what is his policy, of his ideas, and also his role that he plays in right-wing politics in France.
Yeah, yeah, well, yeah. Eric Zemmour is the leader of Reconquête Party. It's the name of his political party. Uh, he was a journalist before
Mhm.
on CNews, which is the you can say the main conservative channel in France.
Mhm.
Uh, and yeah, and then in 2022 he decided to also be a candidate for presidency.
Mm-hmm.
I think he made some good points, especially on immigration. I think he was and he still is more how can I say more direct on immigration. For example, he used a term grand remplacement in French.
Yeah, a great replacement,
Yeah.
or in Dutch we in Dutch all of these words are very controversial. In Dutch you have the word omvolking, which is let's say the translation of it, and it's a word that you are not allowed to say basically.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I think he made some great points about immigration and wokeism also.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think he was a little too harsh, maybe too direct and too extreme for many French people.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, he allowed Marine Le Pen to be placed a little more on the left.
More moderate.
Yeah, more moderate, which is quite funny because it's she was always considered as the most extreme candidate,
Mhm.
and now that Eric Zemmour is in the political game, she tends to be seen as more moderate than.
Mhm. That's kind of funny how that works indeed. You can see it's a lot about perception, right? Because the fact that there is someone with more right wing views than Marine Le Pen, for example, doesn't change the views of Marine Le Pen. It just shows that there's something even more right wing, so to speak. Um, uh, of course, you said predictions are difficult, but like you said, there are quite some challenges in France with immigration, with economy, etc. I guess we have in 2027 we have the new presidential elections, of course, which will be quite big for France.
Oh yeah.
Of course, we can 2 years. A lot can happen in 2 years. But what when we talk about we talked in general about the development of National Rally up to maybe the next elections. But what do you think in general will be the patterns that people should follow, which are are crucial now in French politics that can change the outcome in, for example, the next elections?
Could you specify your question?
Oh, of course. My point is that when it comes to politics, right, there are certain feelings that people have, certain issues that they find important. We mentioned a few in our conversation so far. What do you think of people that want to follow the French politics? What kind of signals and what kind of topics do people need to follow to understand how the French political situation will develop towards the next elections?
So yeah, okay. So yeah, we talked earlier about immigration and economical and social issues, but foreign politics are very important in France too, because for example in 2022, I think one of the reasons of Macron winning the elections, despite being hated by a big part of the population, is that he presented himself as the defender of democracy
Mhm.
against Russia. He
Mhm.
positioned himself really as a as a, how can I say, as a leader in Europe, who is able to talk with Vladimir Putin and reason him a little. So yeah, one of the main topics I think in the upcoming 2027 election will be foreign policies and foreign policies, and
Yes.
how our relations with Russia and the United States will be.
I think for most European countries, this is kind of a big issue. I think maybe as a last topic, then let's talk about this. A lot of right wing parties in the West have very different views when it comes to geopolitics, when it comes to relationship with the United States, with Russia, Ukraine, Middle East, you name it. What would you say on the dominant right wing parties, like for example on National Rally? What is their stance on the geopolitical situation of France? Because of course now we're hearing Macron say, you know, our nuclear weapons that we have in France, maybe we can use that as instead of America to protect Europe against Russia. That's of course something that you hear now a lot on the news.
Yeah.
What do you think that more right-wing parties actually? What's their view on how France should act in geopolitics?
Yeah. Well, it's especially in the National Rally, there are some conflicted views on what to do with Russia and Ukraine. Some members of the National Rally tend to be closer with Russia and think that they can negotiate with Vladimir Putin to get to end the war and the bloodshed, because millions of Russians and Ukrainians died during this war, and others like Jordan Bardella think that Russia. I think he said in an interview, I think it was yesterday or something like that, that Russia was a multi-dimensional threat for France. So there are different point of views, but I think what is important is that most of right-wing parties in France don't want to go to war against Russia. Contrary to Macron political party or people from the Socialist Party. So of course they will tell you that they don't want war. Nobody wants war, but I think the main stance in right-wing parties in France right now is to try to negotiate with both Ukraine, Russia, and the United States. I think it's the main the main positioning in right-wing parties.
Fair enough. I will say, while over the next period French politics is developing, I would love to have like a recap of how things evolved. I really want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
And I also, if people want to follow your work, where could they do that?
So I think that they can add me on Instagram. It's Jean Charles Soulier, so the same name on the screen. And I think I'm trying to create a blog political blog of my own, so I will give you reviews on that. But I wanted maybe to point out one last thing, if it's
Of
okay
course.
with you, because I've seen quite an interesting thing when I looked up and when I prepared for your questions a little, because in France in 2005, I think it was the 29th May, or wait, just a second. But yeah, so 29th of May 2005, French people voted against the European Constitution, and I think that a little because of that, 2 days after, in the Netherlands, you also voted against the European Constitution. Is it correct?
Can you repeat the last sentence for me for 1 second?
So it was in 2005. We had a referendum, a vote.
Yes.
To vote against or for the European Constitution.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, and I read that so the vote of the French people kind of influenced the Netherlands to vote against it too. Do you think it's correct, or?
I could not say if that is true. I know that there was a majority here that voted against it. I would not say that I would know exactly by who it was influenced, but it's an interesting point for sure.
Yeah. And the fact is that we voted against it, but the Nicolas Sarkozy, so the president, decided to, via a treaty called Lisbon Treaty, he imposed us this constitution. So, yeah, it's a kind of a traumatic political event in France.
That's in general. Maybe we'll talk about it next time, about also the relation between France and the European Union. But of course, European politics nowadays is more and more important, and it's, of course, France has a very unique perspective with its history on this. I would say, but that's a whole different topic.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good point that you pointed this out.
Thank you.
All right. I want to thank you again for this interview. And I also want to thank our listeners. If you want to make these kind of conversations possible, please consider becoming a member at nieuwrechts.nl or subscribing to our social media. And thank you, and see you in the next one.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nicolas. Daniel. Thank you.